He built a high wall all around it and put up a notice board. Trespassers will be prosecuted. The only people who were pleased were the snow and the frost.
Spring has forgotten this garden,
they cried.
So we will live here all the year round.
But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none.
He is too selfish,
she said. The tree were so glad to have the children back again, and they had covered themselves with blossoms, and were waving their arms gently above the children's heads. Only the little boy did not run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see the giant coming. And the giant stole up behind him and took him gently in his hand and put him up into the tree. And when the people were going to market at 12 o'clock, they found the giant playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever seen.
Wonder. August. Why I didn't go to school. I know I'm not an ordinary 10-year-old kid. I mean, sure, I do ordinary things, and I feel ordinary. But I know ordinary kids don't make other ordinary kids run away screaming in playgrounds. I know ordinary kids don't get stared at wherever they go. But I'm kind of used to how I look by now. I know how to pretend I don't see the faces people make. We've all gotten pretty good at that sort of thing. Me, Mom, and Dad, Vaya. Actually, I take that back. Vaya can get really annoyed when people do something rude. She feels like she needs to protect me. And Mom and Dad see me as extraordinary. I think the only person in the world who realizes how ordinary I am is me. My name is August, by the way. Next week I start 5th grade. Since I've never been to a real school before, I am completely petrified. People think I haven't gone to school because of the way I look, but it's not that. It's because of all the surgeries I've had. 27 since I was born. I'm much stronger now, though. Mom homeschools me. She used to be a children's book illustrator, but now she's too busy taking care of me and Vaya. I wanted to go to school, but only if I could be like every other kid going to school. Have lots of friends and hang out after school and stuff like that. Summer, weird kids. Some kids asked me why I hang out with the freak so much. If they knew him, they wouldn't call him that. Because he's a nice kid, I always answer, and don't call him that. Julian had nicknamed him the zombie kid, and that's what everyone was calling him. And August knew it. I've been sitting with him for 2 weeks now, and let's just say he's not the neatest eater in the world. But other than that, he's pretty nice. I had warned Mom about August's face because I know she's not always so good at faking her feelings, and August was coming over for the first time today. When she saw him, I could tell from the expression that I hadn't prepared her enough, but she was really nice and normal to Augie afterward. After a while, Augie and I got tired of working on our projects and went to hang out in the living room. I wanted to ask him about his face but hesitated a little. He understood and explained.
I have mandibulofacial dysostosis, but I also have this other syndrome thing that I can't even pronounce. And these just morphed together into one big super thing, which is so rare they don't even have a name for it. I am actually considered something of a medical wonder, you know.
He smiled.
That was a joke,
He said.
You can laugh. I am cool beans.
The sun does arise and make happy the skies. The merry bells ring, to welcome the spring. The skylark and thrush, the birds of the bush, sing louder around to the bell's cheerful sound, while our sports shall be seen on the echoing green. Old John with white hair does laugh away care, sitting under the oak among the old folk. They laugh at our play, and soon they all say, such were the joys when we all, girls and boys, in our youth time were seen on the echoing green, till the little ones weary no more can be merry. The sun does descend, and our sports have an end. Round the laps of their mothers, many sisters and brothers, like birds in their nest, are ready for rest, and sport no more seen on the darkening green.
I saw him as I came up. I stopped dead at that, taking him in. He realized I was there, and I saw the face of a young man. Then he turned round, came towards me, and emitted a faint boo. I was not frightened. Boo, I said. Nonsense, you don't belong here. What are you doing?
Confused and awkward, he said,
I'm haunting. I've been here since midnight. There's some little thing that has slipped me, and I can't get back.
I sat down in the chair in my room, and he told me all about his life that had recently ended on earth. The mess he had made of haunting had saddened him terribly. He had expected it to be fun. I got up briskly. Don't brood on these things too much, I said. You've got to pull yourself together and try. And try he did. A complicated series of gestures and movements with the hands. That's how he had come in, and that's how he had to get out again. When he couldn't get it right, he sat down at the foot of the bed and began to sob. To encourage him, I began to try as well. At last, he did it.
I know,
He said.
I can't do it if you look at me. I really can't. I'm a nervous fellow.
All right, I said. I won't look at you, and turned towards the mirror by the bed. He started off very fast, and with the last gesture, he vanished. There was nothing. I was alone. What had happened? Had I been dreaming? And then the clock upon the landing struck 1.
And about these movements?
said Sanderson.
I believe I could do them now.
Clayton stood up. For a moment, he regarded his feet. He raised his 2 hands slowly and smiled at us all. But I think there was just a little hesitation in his smile. Wish stood up and put his arm on Clayton's shoulder.
You've made me believe the story somehow, and I don't want to see the thing done.
Clayton smiled back at him.
Wish,
He said,
is right, and the others are wrong. I shall go. I shall get to the end, and this room will be vacant. I'm certain. Let the thing be tried.
Clayton raised his hands once more to repeat the ghost's movements, and when at last he swung out to this closing gesture, I ceased even to breathe. We waited as if it were an age, and then came from all of us something that was half a sigh of relief and half a reassuring no, for visibly he wasn't going. It was all nonsense. He had told a story, that was all. And then
he built a high wall all around it and put up a notice board. Trespassers will be prosecuted. The only people who were pleased were the snow and the frost.
Spring has forgotten this garden,
They cried.
so we will live here all the year round.
But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none.
He is too selfish.
She said. The tree were so glad to have the children back again, and they had covered themselves with blossoms, and were waving their arms gently above the children's heads. Only the little boy did not run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see the giant coming. And the giant stole up behind him and took him gently in his hand and put him up into the tree. And when the people were going to market at 12 o'clock, they found the giant playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever seen.
The Bet. Mr. Phileas Fogg, an English gentleman, lives by himself in London. He is a man who lives by the clock. Mr. Fogg has just dismissed his previous personal assistant. He is now interviewing an applicant for the job.
Then from this moment, you are in my service.
Phileas Fogg is playing cards with his friends.
I just read this report about a bank robbery. £55,000 have been stolen, and it says that the thief has fled the country in the guise of an English gentleman. The world is large enough for the man to disappear.
It was once. Now you can go around the world in 80 days. I will bet £20,000 against anyone who wishes that I make the tour of the world in 80 days or less. I shall be due here on Saturday, 21st December at 8:45 p.m.
Unknown to Mr. Fogg, he is being followed by Mr. Fix, a detective from Scotland Yard, London, in search of the bank robber Fogg's friends had been talking about. Mr. Fogg and Passepartout have travelled to a few places and are now on their way to Allahabad.
They are going to kill this woman. We must save her.
All this time, Mr. Fix was also following Mr. Fogg. Poor Mr. Fogg is put into jail, and his hopes of winning the bet come crashing down. Soon, it is clear that Mr. Fix has made a mistake.
Mr. Fogg, we must hurry. I have just found out today is Saturday.
Passepartout then seizes his master's hand. They rush out. There are 4 gentlemen standing near the card table in the card room at the Reform Club. There is total silence in the room, except for the ticking of the clock and the muffled sound of the crowd from outside. The players silently count off the seconds. At the 57th second, there is a roar of hurrahs from the crowd outside. Almost immediately, the door opens and Mr. Phileas Fogg appears, followed by a crowd of people. A little white heron was floating along above the water, and then into the sky of this, the one world we all belong to, where everything, sooner or later, is a part of everything else, which thought made me feel, for a little while, quite beautiful myself.
Humans. In order to stay alive and perform physical activities, the human body has to breathe air. We breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide. This process is known as respiration. Breathing happens naturally. Breathing happens because of the respiratory system. The human respiratory system consists of many organs, which includes the nose, throat, windpipe, and lungs. The air enters the nose through a pair of nostrils. As air passes through the nostrils, it gets filtered, warmed, and moistened because of the presence of fine hairs and slimy mucus lining in the nostrils. The fine hairs filter out dust and other particles that enter the nose through the air that is breathed in. Thus, these fine hairs protect the nasal passageways and other parts of the respiratory tract. Mucus is moist. Therefore, it traps dirt and disease-causing microorganisms and helps in the smooth flow of air. We can also breathe air through the mouth. The 2 airways of the nose and mouth meet at the pharynx, which is located at the back of the throat. A small flap of tissue called the epiglottis covers the windpipe when we swallow. This stops food from going into the lungs. The pipe that carries air to the lungs is called the trachea. The trachea divides into 2 branches called bronchi. Each of these enters a lung. In the lung, the bronchi divide into finer, smaller branches called bronchioles. The bronchioles end in tiny air sacs called alveoli, which looks a bit like grapes. The air sacs is surrounded by a network of fine blood vessels called capillaries. The oxygen passes through these air sacs and through the capillary wall into the bloodstream. Oxygen attaches with hemoglobin in the blood and is carried away to all parts of the body. At the same time, carbon dioxide transfers from the bloodstream to the air sacs. The oxygen reaches individual cells where it oxidizes the food and releases energy and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is released as waste. Just beneath the lungs, there is a dome-shaped muscle called diaphragm which partitions the chest cavity from the stomach or abdominal cavity. The diaphragm contracts when we breathe in, thus increasing the space in the chest cavity for lungs to expand. The diaphragm relaxes when we breathe out, thus forcing the air out of the lungs.
We are in what we in Pakistan call a sub-jail, a kind of luxury house arrest. If I look out, I see my mother wandering around the garden, her head covered by a shawl, feeding the birds. There are tears in her eyes. My mother is sad about the waste of food. I know she is remembering all the children we fed in our house and wondering how they are faring now. When I came home from school in Mingora, I never found my house without people in it. Here the only sound is of the birds and Kushal's Xbox. I sit alone in my room doing a jigsaw puzzle and long for guests. We didn't have much money and my parents knew what it was like to be hungry. My mother never turned anyone away. I know my mother is lonely. Now she is always on the phone to everyone back home. Our house has all these facilities, but when she arrived, they were all mysteries to her and someone had to show us how to use the oven, washing machine and the TV. My mother misses going shopping in China Bazaar. She is happier since my cousin, Shah, came to stay. He has a car and takes her shopping. But it's not the same as she can't talk to her friends and neighbors about what she bought. A door bangs in the house and my mother jumps. She often cries, then hugs me. I know my father cries too. He knows people say it's his fault that I was short, that he pushed me to speak up. All he worked for over almost 20 years, has been left behind. His dream in life was to have a very big school in Swat, providing quality education, to live peacefully and to have democracy in our country. In Swat, he had achieved respect and status in society. He never imagined living abroad and he gets upset when people suggest we wanted to come to the UK. Often over meals we talk about home and try to remember things. Already some of the things from Swat seem like stories from a distant place. My father spends much of his time going to conferences on education. I know it's odd for him that now people want to hear him because of me. When he went to France to collect an award for me, he told the audience,
In my part of the world, most people are known by their sons. I am one of the few lucky fathers known by his daughter.
I don't want to be thought of as the girl who was shot by the Taliban, but the girl who fought for education. This is the cause to which I want to devote my life. On my 16th birthday, I was in New York to speak at the United Nations. I did not write my speech with the UN delegates in mind. I wrote it for every person around the world who could make a difference. Deep in my heart, I hoped to reach every child who could take courage from my words and stand up for his or her rights.
Let us pick up our books and our pens,
I said.
They are our most powerful weapons. One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world.
I didn't know how my speech was received until the audience gave me a standing ovation.
Which was Friday, we got them all together and met in the evening to pack. I said I'd pack. I rather pride myself on my packing. They fell into the suggestion with a readiness that had something uncanny about it. George spread himself over the easy chair and Harris cocked his legs on the table. It seemed a longer job than I had thought it was going to be. But I got the bag finished at last, and I sat on it and strapped it.
Aren't you going to put the boots in?
said Harris. I opened the bag and packed the boots in. Had I packed my toothbrush? Of course I had to turn out everything now. I repacked once more. Harris said that we should be wanting to start in less than 12 hours' time and thought that he and George had better do the rest. They started with breaking a cup. Then Harris packed the strawberry jam on top of a tomato and squashed it. And they had to pick out the tomato with a teaspoon. And then it was George's turn and he trod on the butter. I didn't say anything, but I came over and sat on the edge of the table and watched them. It made them nervous and excited, and they packed the pies at the bottom and put heavy things on top and smashed the pies in. Montmorency was in it all, of course. He came and sat down on things, just when they were to be packed. The packing was done at 12:50, and Harris sat on the big hamper and said he hoped nothing would be found broken. We were all ready for bed. Harris was to sleep with us that night, and we went upstairs. My students often ask me, why learn history? Is it important? It is. Studying history enables us to understand different cultures and how the world came to be. By learning about the causes and effects of events, we learn to deal with conflicts among nations and avoid making the same mistakes of the past. As they say, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
The ideas, traditions, and events of the past are connected with and merged into the present in various ways. Understanding this interaction is the study and writing of history.
History helps us make wise decisions, to not repeat those actions that have caused negative reactions. It teaches us about our civilization and how our ancestors handled tasks with limited or no technology. It tells us about our heritage, customs, and practices. It shows us who we were, who we are, and what we should strive to be.
History is not just about dates. It is when they are connected to other dates or to people and places that we can see a pattern. These patterns allow us to know the past and how it has shaped all of us. History is our own fascinating story.
History is important because it helps us compare the past with the present. Each generation must keep a record of events to know what happened in the past and what can be done now. I like reading about the emperors of India, especially the Mughal emperors. I also enjoy reading about the discoveries of people like Aryabhat and Chanakya.
History is both important and necessary. It allows you to comprehend contemporary developments. It shows how the past often restricts aspects of the present. It makes the past relevant to the present as well as the future.
It is necessary for us to know history so that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past. And if we knew what our past was, we would be able to understand better what we have to do differently in order to improve or manage our future. A lot of our present problems come from not paying attention to or forgetting the way things were in the past. My grandfather began building a fairly large library for himself. By the time I was born in 1966, this collection had around 5,000 books. Till class 6, I was very fond of history because the teachers had a way of bringing it alive. Later, I went to an engineering college in Delhi, which was in Kashmiri Gate. Delhi awakened a lot of interest in history in me. When I went back to Calcutta to work, I had the freedom to look at the buildings. It was interesting and absorbing. After that, I moved to Chennai. Sanjay Subramanian, the singer, and I began a website on South Indian classical music which had to be updated every week with articles. Then in 1999, a group of people from the US said they were coming to attend the music festival in December and that they would like to meet me. I suggested that we go on a heritage walk of Mylapore too. It was a great success. That is when I decided to do this as often as possible.
A train station for a student. At 7:04 a.m. sharp, a train stops at the remote Kyushirataki station in the far north of Japan to take on a student on her way to school. She may be the only person on the train, but it lets her continue her education without inconvenience. The railway company had planned to shut the station down 3 years ago. Then it was brought to their notice that one student was still using the train every school day. Hokkaido Railway Co. decided to keep the station open for the girl until she completed high school. Hokkaido Railway Co. received a lot of appreciation for its exemplary customer service. A post on a popular social media site said that this is a long-term investment in the young and wished businesses and leaders in other countries would make a similar commitment to education and the public.
Absorbing hours playing this game. Among my fellow players was a boy named Gaya. Whatever the shape of the gilly, he would pounce on it the way a lizard pounces on an insect. One day, only Gaya and I were playing. He was batting. I was fielding. I tried all means, including foul ones, to put an end to my fielding. But Gaya would not let me go until I had got him out.
I'm going home. Let's see how you stop me.
He hit me with his danda and I hollered. Gaya could not match his weapon of mine. He took to his heels. I promptly wiped my eyes, forgot the blow I had received and ran home laughing. 20 years went by and I qualified as an engineer. While touring the district, I arrived by chance in the same small town that I had lived in as a child. Eager to bring back old memories, I went out for a walk. I recognized my old playmate straight away and wanted to fling my arms around him. But I stopped myself. Well, Gaya, I said coolly, do you recognize me? Gaya bowed his head.
How could I not recognize you, Malik?
He said humbly.
I hope you are well.
Today you and I will play gilli danda. You bat, I'll field. I haven't forgotten that I owe you a turn at batting. Gaya agreed to play very reluctantly. Then we began playing. I hit the gilli, making it leap up in the air. Gaya tried to catch it, but it fell behind him. So when we hit the danda for the third time, I graciously allowed him to bat. Gaya started batting, but very poorly. In a few minutes, he was out. We drove back to the town. Before leaving me, Gaya said,
There will be a gilli danda match here tomorrow. All the old players will play.
Dr. Golaknath Gore got up to fetch a glass of water from the drinking fountain just outside his door. He would hear someone giggling. He would peep into the storeroom and look queerly at the nurses and even the patients, but he couldn't for the life of him make out which of them could produce that peculiar kiki sound. Dr. Gore thought he was going bonkers. One afternoon, Dr. Gore decided to check a file on one of his patients. He pulled out a screechy metal ladder and climbed it to reach the topmost shelf of the cupboard where the file was. But he missed a step and he flew down like a fat bundle of clothes and landed on a swivel chair with a poof. A bottle of indelible ink left open by mistake toppled over and fell all over Dr. Gore's lovely bald head. It was then that he heard it again. Kiki. He charged out into the corridor. He was yelling at the top of his voice.
There's a prank playing poltergeist in this hospital, and it's laughing at me. I, Dr. Golu Gore, shall trap it with my unparalleled powers of super antimeter poltergeistis I shall utterly splash it.
And he raced off into his study next door. Dr. Gore shot out of his room again. He announced,
With this modern device, I shall devastate the little devil, confuse him utterly, immobilize him.
and he walked absent-mindedly back to his room. Once inside, he realized that he had come back, so he decided to go out into the corridor again. But for some queer reason, he turned instead to a closed door on the other side and proceeded to open it. But it was stuck. Each time he tugged at the handle, the giggling grew louder and louder until it became almost unbearable. Little whirls of steam began curling up from his ears as he went thumping across the room on his round flat feet and threw himself against the closed door. The door flew open with a blast and took Dr. Gore in with it. For a moment, chubby Dr. Gore sat stunned. When the noise in his head subsided and he could focus again, he was speechless at what he saw. He saw the giggling ghost, of course. It was an old sink with ancient plumbing and an old tap that had run dry for years and never been closed properly. The air in the half-open tap made a most familiar sound. It went kee-kee-kee-kee. Bright and early the next morning, Sun Singh the plumber arrived with Dr. Gore and went into the washroom next to his study. After a few minutes of slow tinkering with a wrench, the key stopped. A shiny new tap was installed, which